Hey guys, it's Kate Journey, and I am back today to talk about creating atmosphere in your stories. So, creating atmosphere is a combination of a bunch of different things. And what's really important about creating a cohesive atmosphere in a story, and you can do this, you can prep for this, you can plot and have this in mind when you're building the story. You can do this afterwards. Um, I kind of tend to pants this a little bit. Like I build up the story and I have an idea. And then when I get to the end of the story, I'm like, okay, this is the vibe that I feel like is necessary to tell this specific story. And I'll go back through and I'll enhance things or whatnot. But in order to create an atmosphere, we need to create kind of a feeling for the reader, right? So what the reader feels is usually based on what the characters feel. Okay, so what the characters feel, this could be all of their senses. This could be smell, see, feel on their skin, like this could be all of these physical things. And it's good to, when you're writing a story, not just focus on what they can, what they can see and what they can feel, but also what they can taste, what they can smell, what their other senses are telling them, like what's the atmosphere like? Are they scared? Are they, frightened? Is it damp? Is it dark? What are they feeling? And then, on top of that, emotions. But this isn't just like emotions as in how they feel about the other characters and like their internal struggle, but how they feel scene to scene in the situations that they're in. So if we want to create an atmosphere of fear, we want to start with them feeling comfortable and then slowly ramp up the eerie kind of discomfort feeling until they're confused, they're paranoid, they're scared, they don't know what's going on, that kind of thing. Or if we're writing a cozy, like we want to keep them like pretty happy for the most part. We want them to be laughing, we want them to be joking, like that type of a thing. This all helps create the atmosphere because the atmosphere is the experience that the reader is having, right? On top of that, we want to make sure that our environments have to reflect also how we want our characters to feel. If you're writing a cozy mystery, you're not going to want to put that in the middle of like a deep, dark forest that's terrifying, or like on a glacier or something like that. Like your environment where the people are needs to fit with the atmosphere that you're creating. So if we're talking like a cozy, we need to be in a bookstore. We need to be in a small town. We need to be in a place where there's a bakery and a coffee shop and, a library or a bookstore or whatnot, right? I think I said bookstore twice, probably because my cozies take place in a bookstore. My main character lives in a bookstore. But my dark fantasy, my Birthright of the Forsaken series, that takes place, the first few books in that take place in Greenland. And I'm thinking about rewriting those. Like there's a whole drama about those books that I can't seem to get settled with them. But I did with them accomplish something with the atmosphere that I was really proud of. I kind of nailed on my first attempt in those books, which was this cold, stark, overwhelming feeling of danger right from the get-go, because I put them in a place that was cold and stark and dangerous. You don't want to go out in Greenland if you don't know what you're doing. You don't want to go out into the middle of the ice sheet without the proper equipment, the proper training, and with people that will help you and guide you. And my characters had almost none of that. They had the equipment but no training, and it was a mess. And it was a mess intentionally because I wanted that atmosphere of the fear around this dangerous situation that they're in, that they are not prepared for. Okay, so another thing that creates atmosphere is what Brandon Sanderson calls a tone promise. I will link his series down below, his latest writing series. This is Brandon Sanderson. So he talks about tone promise, which I think for me, I see as part of the overall atmosphere of the story is the tone promise. Because once again, it sets our reader in the story, in the situation, in the way that we want to. The idea behind it is like you're walking in and the names of things, the way that's, the equipment that people have, especially if you're creating your own fantasy world. Like in my newest series that I'm working on, my Dungeon Punk story, I have a city in there called Wraithhold. There you go. And that sets a tone for that city. I'm still kind of nailing down this world. But the tone that I want for that city is to be horrifying, to be scary. It is wraithhold. It is full of dead things. It is terrifying. And so you walk in with that name of it, knowing that this situation, they walk into that city, it's going to be scary. That is a tone promise. Okay, so another thing of like a segue into from this tone promise is the words that are used, not just for the names of things, which is the example that I use, but like the verbiage that you use when you're writing. So if you want to write something that feels very high fantasy, you're going to use a very different type of language than you're going to use with things that feel more low fantasy, like more urban, more, real world contemporary fantasy. You're not going to have a character that says bet in, in a fantasy in a different world. That's not very likely. That's going to feel really jarring. However, you will, if you're writing a contemporary fantasy, have a character that says bet. That's going to happen. Like that's very, with the language that we've got right now, that would feel very realistic and set the tone for, hey, this is in our world. Using language like that, especially newer language that's coming in the younger generations, really helps set a story in that time frame. So if we're looking at a historical fiction, we need to be looking at language that they would have used. We need to be looking at not just like the formal language that they would have used, but also what curse words would they have used? What terms of affection would they have used? What foods would they have eaten? And that tells a lot about culture. So like for a contemporary, I would have them get coffee and a croissant at the next street, because we have that here where I'm living, readily available next door. If I'm writing a historical fiction, they're eating things like gruel. They are drinking, they're drinking like grog, essentially. They're drinking like a beer type of thing. They're maybe drinking wine. Their water can't really be trusted. They're eating soups that have been cooking for, they have these giant cauldrons that have been cooking this soup that's just been an ongoing thing that's been cooking this entire time for years. They never let the hearth die out, because if it does, they risk death and exposure and all sorts of things. Like, that is a very different atmosphere than a contemporary cozy that is going to, go to the coffee shop and get a coffee and a croissant and living in this, first world kind of situation. And that helps build atmosphere, because if I was writing historical fiction, I could either go with, they're in the castle and they're eating the nice food and they're drinking the wine and they have the beer and all the things, or they're eating the perpetual soup. They're eating the stale bread with the mold on it. They're getting rye poisoning and seeing demons everywhere because they're eating bad bread. Like, it, you have to look at it from all of the different perspectives, because even just historical fiction, you could write it from a bunch of different perspectives, and that's across a swath of cultures. So that really creates the tone. A peasant life in England is going to be very, very different than a Native American life on the plains. They're going to have a very different experience and a very different feel and a very different atmosphere. One is going to be cold and dark and starving, and the other is going to be hot and looking for water and, different. It's going to be different. So I think that about wraps it up for me for this morning. It is very early, and I think I've touched on everything that I wanted to talk about. If you guys want to ask questions in the comments, please do so. I know I've missed stuff. I know there's a lot more to this conversation to be had, but once again, it is 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's somebody driving by in a very loud car already. I need to go back to bed. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will be back in a couple of days with a video about turning seasons into episodes and episodes into scenes and all the things. I think we're doing episodes into scenes. I'm tired. Anyway, I will see you in a couple of days.